Welcome everyone to the Hellenic Initiative Canada New Leaders webinar event, Greece, the Land of Diversity. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Natalie. I am the chair of THI Canada New Leaders Executive Committee. We are a group of young professionals who volunteer their time to THI Canada and have a deep commitment to philanthropy and supporting Greece. The new leaders are Philhellenes and members of the Greek diaspora who are passionate about working together, Oli Mazi, to build a better future for Greece. Today, we're going to take a journey through Greece's natural environment and rich biodiversity, discover its unique flora and fauna, and discuss what the future holds for conservation and protection of our much-loved Greek landscape. The reason we are hosting this webinar today is because we care about the sustainability of Greece's environment and believe in preserving its natural beauty and heritage for future generations of Greeks and its visitors to enjoy. Recently, the new leaders began a collaborative initiative with the Hellenic Society for the Protection of Nature and are working closely to create a volunteer and mentorship program which will connect young Greek Canadians and Philhellenes with Greece's environment. Our mentorship program aims to promote projects between Canadian and Greek professionals and academics, which will focus on nature and conservation and sustainability. The Hellenic Society for the Protection of Nature is a well-known NGO, founded in 1951. Since its inception, it has actively pursued goals in the areas of nature conservation and restoration, environmental education, sustainable management, and the raising of public awareness, as well as legal intervention against the contravention of environmental laws. It has been instrumental in the development of national parks and other protected areas in Greece. It is based in Athens and it is active throughout the whole country. Today, we are joined by Mr. Nikos Petrou, who is a well-known naturalist, photographer, and author. Since the late 1980s, Nikos has been photographing nature and wildlife, traveling extensively throughout Greece and many other countries. We are very pleased to welcome Nikos, who is joining us today from Athens. To date, Nikos has published 15 major books, the result of long years of research and fieldwork. He has also published many articles on the environment and is a frequent speaker at seminars, conventions, and symposia in Greece and abroad. Nikos has been involved in nature conservation, mainly with the Hellenic Society for the Protection of Nature. He has been a member of the HSPN Board of Directors since 2005, and since 2009 has been repeatedly elected as president. He is also responsible for the overall coordination of its European and international projects. Nikos has been a member of the Board of Directors of the International Foundation for Environmental Education since 2016. Following Nikos' presentation, there will be a question time. Please feel free to submit any questions you may have during the webinar through the Q&A Zoom function. Over to you, Nikos.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Natalie, for the introduction. And I must say that we at HSPN are very excited and happy to be working with the Hellenic Initiative and new leaders. And we're looking forward to a very constructive collaboration. And now let me get started with the presentation. I would like to start by challenging the commonly heard perception that Greece equals sun, beaches, archaeological sites, and white houses on the Aegean Islands. There's much more to Greek nature than that. If I were to talk to you about boreal forests, dark, humid forests of spruce, birch, haunted by animals like the black bear or wolves, would you think of Greece? I'm sure the Canadians would probably think of Canada, and most others would think of Scandinavia or maybe Northern Europe. But there is an area in Greece in the north, in the prefecture of Drama, near the Greek-Bulgarian border, which is covered by extensive boreal forests hosting the associated species, some of which do not occur anywhere else in the country. If I were to talk to you of carnivorous plants, you would probably think of fly traps in steamy jungles, but would you think of Greece? And yet Greece has 7 different species belonging to 3 genera: the sundews, the butterworts, and the genus Utricularia, all of which occur in humid areas, wet parts, such as these perennial waterfalls in the remote gorges of the Acheloos River. If I talk to you of orchids, you'd probably think about tropical countries, but Greece has the richest orchid flora in Europe with over 220 species, including many of the bee orchids, the genus Ophrys, the flowers of which mimic in color and texture insects so they can attract their pollinators. And if I were to talk of chameleons, most of you would probably think of Madagascar, but Greece has 2 species, the African chameleon, which is present in a small area near the town of Pylos in southwestern Peloponnese, and the common chameleon, which is now restricted to the island of Samos. And speaking of Madagascar, if I were to talk to you of a species that spends half his lifetime there, would you connect it to the Greek islands? Well, there is such a species, Eleonora's falcon, a small raptor that spends its winter in Madagascar, and the Greek islands host 85% of the global population. This is a very agile predator, an aerial pirate that has adapted its lifestyle. It does not breed in the spring, as most birds do. It breeds in late summer, so it can use a plentiful food source, the migrating birds. So its nesting colonies are on the islands along the major migratory flyways, and it hunts for birds out at sea like a seabird. And if I were to talk to you of vultures fighting over a carcass, you'd probably think of the dusty South African veld. But in Greece, we have all 4 species of Eurasian vultures: the griffon, the bearded vulture, which eats only bones and is now restricted to Crete; the cinereus, or black vulture, which is found in the forests of Dadia in northeastern Greece in Thrace; and the globally threatened Egyptian vulture. In fact, Greece is one of very few countries in Europe where majestic species such as a globally threatened vulture can be seen in the wild, chased away by a wolf. This is indeed rare sightings, and this is actually the wealth of Greek nature. There are many more examples that I could give you, but I think this suffices to show you that Greece is indeed a land of diversity. Now let's look at the reasons why this is so. One of them is location. Greece is situated in the Mediterranean basin, what we call the Mediterranean biogeographical region, which is one of the global hotspots of biodiversity. And it's at the corner, at the crossroads of 3 continents, Europe, Asia, and Africa, which means that species from all 3 continents are present here, increasing its biodiversity. And in fact, for some of these species, they do not appear anywhere else in Europe. So Greece is, in fact, a global hotspot of biodiversity itself, hosting almost 23% of all European flora and fauna species and over 2% of the global total. The main characteristic of the Greek landscape is polymorphy, by the way, a nice Greek word, both in the large and in the small scale. The country is dominated by mountains, mountain ranges, crossing the country from north to south and east to west and extending even onto the islands. And islands, of course. There are almost 10,000 different islands on the Greek seas, ranging from small rocks to Crete, which is the largest one. We have the 2nd longest coastline in Europe with a total length of 16,000 kilometers, which is about 30% of the total Mediterranean coastline. And we also have the deepest waters in the Mediterranean, reaching over 5,000 meters in the Hellenic Trench, which is a very deep underwater canyon running from the Ionian Islands south of Crete and then eastwards onto Rhodes. And this is the realm of sperm whales, which, by the way, is another animal most people would not associate with Greece. In fact, the Hellenic Trench holds almost all of the Eastern Mediterranean subpopulation, and it's one of the very few places in the world where social groups, mothers and calves, are together with the males throughout the year. There are 10 major coastal wetlands and hundreds of smaller ones on the mainland and on the islands. There are about 60 lakes, 20 of which are man-made. About 90 rivers, the largest of which running entirely on Greek soil are Aliakmonas and Achelos that we see here. But there are also countless streams and torrents up in the mountains, many of them creating very impressive waterfalls. There are over 8,000 caves and karst formation, 3,500 of them alone in Crete. And if you add to these geologic formations at sea and on land, hot springs, and even active volcanoes, you get an idea of the variety of the Greek landscape and the niches it provides for wildlife. And we should not forget the influence of humans. Humans, through their activities over the last 4 millennia or longer, have been reconfiguring the landscape, modifying the natural ecosystems through a variety of activities such as grazing, removal of forests, drainage of wetlands, cultivation, and actually in some cases creating new man-made forests like the extensive olive groves that we see in many parts of the country, especially in the south and on the islands. The climate is equally varied. It starts from subdesert to this in the south and southeast of Crete, extending to Mediterranean over most of the islands and the coastline. Although if you were in Athens yesterday, you wouldn't believe that the coastline has Mediterranean climate. This is a picture of yesterday's snowstorm on the seafront of Athens. This is weather more common to the inland and higher altitudes where we have the continental type of climate. And there are areas there that get very cold where the lakes freeze over for months, although that is becoming a rarer occasion now with climate change. And some parts of Greece, especially in the north near Florina, can see very low temperatures, sometimes tens of degrees below zero. Another particularity of the Greek natural environment is that all this wealth, all this diversity occurs very frequently in small areas. For example, a visitor in northern Greece, in the area of Kavala, can spend his morning swimming on the beaches of Keramoti or on the island of Thasos, then wander around the wetlands searching for rare birds such as spur-winged plover, which is an Asian bird extending into Greece, or explore the famous riparian forests of the Nessos River, the fabled Koja Orman, the great forests, where he can see the white-tailed eagle and the elusive jackals. This area holds the largest population in Greece. And the same afternoon, he can be high in the Rhodope Mountains in dense forests of beech, or up in the virgin forest of Fracto. This is an area that has been left undisturbed for hundreds of years. And this is actually a natural laboratory where the forest is evolving without human interference. And there he can come across red deer, or one of the emblematic species of the area, the elusive capercaillie, which occurs there. It's the only part in the country where it can be seen. Or the other emblematic species of the area, the endemic yellow lily of the Rhodope range. From one place to the other, he will travel less than 70 kilometers, but in doing so, he will come across all the vegetation zones and many of the habitats that occur throughout Europe. Now let's look at the numbers and start with the plants. There are 6,600 species, or taxa, actually, which is a scientific term meaning species and subspecies in Greece. The numbers in parentheses indicate the number of endemic species, that is, the species that occur only here. So Greece is very rich in endemics. We see that 22% of all its plants are found only in Greece. And one of the richest area in endemic species is Crete, with 235 endemic taxa, about 10% of its total population. And as an example, in this rock face high near the Gigilos Peak in White Mountains, the Lefka Ori, you can find 8 endemic species, which is far more than you can find in whole countries in Europe, if you consider that Denmark has only 1 endemic species. The 3 plants that we see here in the photograph are all endemic, and one of them in the middle, Bupleurum kakiscale, is a very restricted range endemic that can only be found in that area. And here we have a view of some of the special Cretan endemics. Greece hosts 3,500 mushrooms or fungi, 456 birds, which account for about 50% of the total species found in Europe, 115 mammals, 2 of which are endemic, which is almost 42% of the species found in Europe, 22 amphibians and 64 reptiles, of which 3 and 9 respectively are endemic. It's very rich in freshwater fishes. It's one of the richest countries in Europe with 162 species, 61 of which are endemic or near endemic, occurring only in Greece and small parts of neighboring countries. And 420 saltwater fishes, about 20 of which are endemic. The number of invertebrates is very high. It's estimated at over 30,000, and it's expected that it may even reach 50,000 as exploration extends to even more remote areas because there are new species continuously discovered. 262 of which are butterflies, with 7 endemics in the country. Now, all this wealth faces a lot of challenges and pressures. The main is habitat loss or degradation. If we look at a study by IUCN regarding red list species occurring in Greece, you can see here categorization of the various threats to biodiversity. And this is the number of species they affect and do not affect with the gray part. But keep in mind that this does not reflect the total number of species, but only the red list species that IUCN was examining at the time. So let's just go over the threats now. We said that the main one is modification of natural ecosystems, loss of habitats. And this can happen through a variety of ways. One of them is wildfires, and you can see here what happened to the area around the Marathon Lake north of Athens in 2009. This is the before and after the fire. This is quite common. Wildfires are very frequent in Greece, such as this one in Kythera in 2017, which destroyed a large part of the island. And here I should point out that HSPN is running a major project on the island for the prevention of fires, with the help and involvement of the local communities. The main thing is that climate change seems to be intensifying the frequency and the severity of forest fires. In the last 50 years in the Eastern Mediterranean, the average number of heat waves, their intensity and their duration has increased by, you see, almost 6 or 7-fold. And the last 20 years have seen the highest average temperatures for summer in the last 500 years. And as you may have noticed, 220 was the hottest year ever recorded in Europe, and according to some ways of measuring temperatures in the world. So it looks like climate change is playing havoc with our forests. Overgrazing is another problem, especially from goats, particularly when it follows a fire, which then prevents natural regeneration. But it also is a large problem on the smaller islands where the area is restricted. So overgrazing is a serious threat for plants, and especially a narrow range or sensitive endemic species. Intensification of agriculture has led to the complete loss of the small-scale cultivation, as we see in this picture, which created a lot of niches for wildlife with the hedges and the alternation of open areas and wooded areas. So now we have extensive cultivated areas, and this also leads to over-extraction of water, which has caused serious problems in some cases, especially in the Thessalian plain. And this, in some ways, leads to poorly thought major public works. This is a picture from the works in the basin of the Acheloos River. I assume that many of you will have heard of the infamous Acheloos diversion project, which was supposed to take water from the basin of the river and transported below the mountains to water the Thessalian plain in a completely unsustainable development of agriculture. Fortunately, this project has been blocked through the coordinated action of NGOs in the country, and HSPN has been part of that fight. We'll talk about that later on. Transportation and service corridors. This is essentially the major roadways, such as the Egnatia motorway, which crosses the country now. Such big arteries prevent the free movement of the animals, especially larger animals. And in northern Greece, we have populations of bears and wolves. They have caused quite a problem. And now one of the solutions, or the solution, is to create underpasses or overpasses, as we see here, so that we can still have free movement of the animals. Expansion of cities, urban expansion, and expansion of various infrastructures also create problems. We see here such an area that has been demarcated for development in the island of Evia, and we can see the loss of natural vegetation. Sometimes this is done without proper planning. As is the case of Mount Verlacro. This is one of the most important mountains in Greece in view of flora. It hosts a number of species that are found nowhere else in the country. It's a very rich mountain. However, we have plans for expansion of the skiing infrastructure there in an area that is seeing less and less snow every year, and the time frame of the skiing center being active is becoming smaller and smaller every year, but there's still plans to expand it. Touristic activities and infrastructure can also be detrimental to habitats and wildlife, for example, affecting coastal habitats such as sand dunes, or in case like we see here, where the sun loungers have taken over a large part of the beach area. They can prevent the loggerhead turtles from coming ashore to lay their eggs. Now, Greece is trying to phase out its coal-powered plants and transition to renewable energy sources. However, this transition is based upon an outdated spatial planning for renewable energy sources, and that plan does not take into account biodiversity conservation. It does not take into account preservation of sensitive landscapes, and it does not take into account the need for sustainable tourism development in many areas, especially as regards the creation of wind farms, wind turbines, and this has caused considerable debate and actually challenges, and I would say even conflicts in some areas, especially with local people being against the placement of wind farms in their areas. Another big threat for biodiversity are invasive alien species which outcompete the native species. One of them is the silverleaf nightshade. And interestingly enough, another one is Hacer negundo, which in Greece we call the Canadian maple. So this is becoming a major pest in many areas, as we see here, as in the Nessos River Delta, taking over the natural vegetation. And we have animals too, as the koipu, which has escaped from animal farms, from bird farms, and is now well established in some of our wetlands and is threatening the native species. Waste management and pollution are other major issues. I'm sure some of you might have heard of the case of Lake Koronia, with extensive and repeated pollution incidents leading to death of birds, and actually even a court case against Greece by the European Union. Unfortunately, such scenes with waste are not uncommon in Greece. And fortunately, our wildlife has learned to adapt and live with what we so rashly throw out in nature. And then we have illegal activities which are aided by poor law enforcement and in many cases very low penalties for environmental crimes. One of the most obvious and prevalent examples is illegal construction. What you see here is an area after a fire. You can tell that because of the density and uniform size of the pine trees that we see here. And in between the pine trees, you see houses. Now, those are completely illegal because all burned cases are automatically classified as protected, so there shouldn't be any building there. And here we see illegal buildings within the protected area of national park. This is the Mesology Wetlands, and those buildings have been there for 40 years. Those are summer cottages from the nearby village inhabitants. This is actually the infamous Αυθαίρετα, which from the non-Greeks translates as unlicensed. And this is a practice that governments, unfortunately, have either tolerated or actually supported, because when election time comes, this is used to either gain votes or get money by legalizing those illegal constructions. Illegal farming practices leading into destruction of natural habitats, as in this case. And this photo was loaned by Arhelon. This is one of only 3 photos that are not mine in the presentation. The other one was the sperm whales, and there's one more coming with the dead vultures in a little while. So here we have construction of destruction, excuse me, of a priority habitat, the coastal dunes, in order to expand farms. Illegal plant collection, especially of orchids, is becoming very widespread in Greece. We see here an area where orchids have been uprooted in northern Epirus. And this happens because the bulbs of orchids are used for the creation of salep, which is a beverage very common in Turkey, but also in Northern Europe. And we should keep in mind that a cup of salep destroys 2 orchids because they're uprooted, so they die. And it's not only orchids, but a lot of aromatic and medicinal plants. On the left here, we see the mountain tea, and on the right is Gentiana lutea. Those species are heavily collected, especially in the mountains of northern Greece, sometimes even from people entering from neighboring countries, from Albania or Bulgaria. And this is indeed causing problems to their population. So some of them are actually threatened, at least at the local level. Illegal hunting, unfortunately, still persists, especially in the wetlands, the large wetlands where it's difficult to control. And here we see 2 ferruginous ducks, which are protected species among the harvest. And we have the case of the spring hunting of the turtle doves, which is considered a traditional practice in the Ionian Islands. And finally, a major issue is the illegal use of poison baits, which are used to control predators such as wolves mainly, or feral dogs, which attack herds and lead secondarily to the death of raptors, birds of prey, especially carrion-eating birds, such as the vultures and golden eagles. Here we see an area in the Nestor's Gorge, which hosted until 2012 the largest vulture colony, Griffon vulture colony on mainland Greece. And following a poisoning incident in that area, the colony has now completely been destroyed. So we see that there are quite a few challenges. There are, fortunately, the requirements of the European legislation, which have also been adopted in Greek legislation. So we are forced to comply with those. And they have played a major part in preserving and ensuring that wildlife and nature in Greece will continue to exist. And this is where the Hellenic Society for the Protection of Nature, the HSPN, comes in. As Natalie said, we're the oldest environmental NGO in Greece. We celebrate our 70th year of operation this year. The HSPN was founded 70 years ago by pioneers, mainly coming from the mountaineering circles, who discovered at that time the first signs of deterioration in Greek nature and decided that they had to act, to do something. And if you think that many of the concepts that now come to our mind when you think of nature or conservation at that time, 70 years ago, did not even exist as ideas, you can understand how forward-looking those people were. And at the time, the 50 founders of HSPN included prominent figures of the letters and sciences. This is Iakovos Santorineos, the main person behind the movement. Kesar Alexopoulos, university professor and academician. Maximos Mitsopoulos, again, university professor and academician, the first president. Konstantinos Voulimis, a famous naturalist of the time. Spiros Marinatos, well-known archaeologist who excavated the Akrotiri in Thira. Well-known novelist Elias Venezi. So these were the kind of people that founded the HSPN. And from its founding, it has been at the forefront of establishing protected areas and natural parks. In the 1950s and 60s, it fought for the creation of the national park of the Samaria Gorge in Crete. I'm sure those of Greek descent are familiar with it. Also, the National Park of the Prespa Lakes, which was established in 1974. And it has also worked to safeguard important, iconic, emblematic species of Greece, such as the Cretan wild goat, which has become its emblem, and many other species, such as the loggerhead turtle, the careta careta, the Mediterranean monk seal, and many others. It was also a nursery because from its ranks, from the young people that joined it at the time, eventually rose other NGOs in Greece, such as the Hellenic Ornithological Society. For more than 3 decades, up to the mid-80s, HSPN was a main contact in Greece with the international and main bodies for environmental conservation. A prominent figure in the Greek environmental movement was Byron Antipas. He was the Secretary General of HSPN for 35 years, actually its driving force. And just one moment that's significant in the history both of HSPN and Greece is the signing of the Ramsar Convention for the wetlands of international importance. It was Antipas that represented Greece, and he actually went to Ramsar in Iran at the time on his own expenses. HSPN has been honored for its work by the Academy of Athens, the Council of Europe, and the Ford Foundation. In 1992, HSPN started collaboration with the Foundation of Environmental Education in Europe, which later on in 2000 became FEE, dropping the last E. This is now the world's largest environmental education organization with about 100 members in 77 countries. It reaches almost 80,000 schools globally and 18 million students of all ages, implementing 5 programs, which we will see in a minute as we talk about what HSPN does, and having strategic partners at all levels. So HSPN today is active in 5 areas. Those are environmental interventions, nature conservation projects, environmental education, sustainable management in the tourism sector, and awareness raising and providing information for the general public. If we look at them one by one, environmental interventions, when serious breaches of environmental legislation or serious threats are posed to Greek nature. I already mentioned the case of Acheloos. This project, this destructive, poorly thought and poorly planned and poorly studied project, was stopped after almost 20 years of fighting by a coalition of NGOs, which included the HSPN. It started in 1993, and we only got the final resolution 4 or 5 years ago. HSPN has involved in protecting the last remaining streams in the Athens area. This is the Picrodaphne stream in southern Athens, and there was a big plan to completely clear it for flood control reasons and replace it with the cement waterway, which will be paved over by a road. So this fortunately has been stopped, and we recently won a court case for that, and we've involved the local communities, the local municipality, and engaged a number of means to do that, as public meetings, info days, publication of books to inform the public. HSPN implements a lot of conservation projects, both nationally and cross-border internationally. And we're utilizing the funding mechanisms of the European Union, such as the LIFE project. Here you see the 5 LIFE projects that we've been active in the last 10 years or so. Some of them have to do with protection of priority species and habitats. One of them had to do with providing information and increasing knowledge of the public about environmental legislation. the directive for environmental liability, that's Life Natura Themis. New Life for Drylands, our newest project, is trying to find solutions for the phenomenon of desertification. And actually, there are some important outcomes. For example, from Life for Open Forests, there came a ministerial decision for the protection of the Natura 2000 site on Mount Calidromo, which was not protected by legislation. This is the first such occurrence in many, many years for HSPN. Another interesting development is the creation of an application for smart devices, which allows the user to, in real life, to submit complaints or provide information when they find out infractions of environmental legislation. Here we see a case of waste dumping or other illegal actions. This information through the application is directed immediately to the authorities. We also have a number of other projects ongoing at the time with various subjects, management of the Posidonia, which is the seagrass meadows. We have a Horizon 2020 project on waste management and bioeconomy, environmental education project, and we also have an ongoing and continuing cooperation with NGOs in Turkey about protection of shared species and habitats. And I think this is a very good demonstration that civil society can transcend the problems posed by politicians and governments. Now, the HSPN has been active in environmental education since before 1992. We have 5 programs, 3 of which are the international FEE programs: Eco Schools, learning about forests, and Young Reporters for the Environment. And 2 others are national programs: Nature Without Garbage and the Green Corners of My Neighborhood. And every year, more than 1,000 schools participate in these networks, in these programs from all over the country, with thousands of students and volunteer teachers who provide their time to run the project. There is a variety of activities involving teaching and activities in nature, educational seminars for the teachers, creation of material for the classrooms. Then we have sustainable management in the tourism sector. HSPN is a national operator of the 2 well-known eco labels, Green Key and the Blue Flag. I'm sure most of you will have heard at least of the Blue Flag. It is the most respected and widely known eco label, and it is awarded to beaches, marinas, and sustainable tourism boats. Greece holds currently the 2nd place in the world among the 47 countries that participate in the program. And there are 4 categories of criteria, which is quality of the bathing waters, environmental education, which is a major part of the program, safety and quality of services, including facilities for people with disabilities, and of course environmental management, which ensure the environmentally friendly management both of the beach and the surrounding area. Then there is Green Key, which is an eco label for the hospitality industry. It's given to hotels, hostels, camping sites, restaurants, convention centers. And Greece, with 380 enterprises, holds a 3rd place in the world among 65 countries that implement the program. The criteria for Green Key include environmental management and especially resource conservation, so that we make sure that there's no waste of energy, water, and proper use of cleaners and chemicals. We want the active participation and involvement of staff, the suppliers, and the local communities. And this is done through awareness raising of the staff, visitors, and the local people. Of course, we encourage the program encourages the use of national and local products, corporate social responsibility, and also environmental education and green activities. The last area that HSPN is active in is providing information to the general public, and including increasing its awareness about environmental issues. And this is done through a variety of activities, which include seminars, talks, excursions to areas of special interest, reforestation projects, cleaning projects in beaches, a variety of activities involving both our members and friends and the general public, and a lot of volunteers, and through publications which include books of on environmental subjects, and of course our journal, which is the longest active, being continuously published since 1975. It's the longest periodical in Greece, and actually the only one at the moment with an environmental subject. So this, in brief, gives you an idea of the work that HSPN does. And I think for the new leaders, this will provide ideas about the things that we can do together in the program that we're planning. With this, I thank you for your attention, and I will be glad to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you very much, Nikos, for providing us with your insights and observations regarding Greece's biodiversity and sharing your beautiful photos. And thank you for the work you've done to conserve Greece's environment. We haven't been able to travel to Greece, so seeing your photos is the next best thing. We do have a few questions which have come through. The first one is, are there film documentaries of Mr. Nikos Petru available for purchase?
Well, no, not as such. My book is featured, my work is featured in my books, and those are available, or some of them that are still in print are available through the HSPN. But we have produced some documentaries as part of our projects. For example, the ICON project on the conservation of orchids. There's a documentary on orchids. There's another documentary for the Life Project for Open Forest, and this can be found on the HSPN YouTube channel. So those are, anybody interested can find them there.
Yes. Okay, wonderful. I think we'll also be sharing the links later on. The next question is, what technology do you think Greece needs to focus on most to help curb its environmental concerns now and in the future?
Well, actually, technology is a very broad context. I think if we're talking about the mostly climate change, I think we're talking about renewable energy sources. So this is there's a big discussion in Greece at this time. I touched on that. We're phasing out the coal plants anyway, so we're moving to wind farms and solar panels. We're looking, or we should look at other sources of energy, such as geothermal energy. For example, some of the islands that have the volcanoes like Milos or Nisiros, there are obviously geothermal fields there that can be used to produce energy. There are technological advantages. There are wind generators or turbines that can be placed at sea, floating generators or things like that. There's wave power that can be harnessed. So I think there are a lot of things that we can look at. The main thing is that at the moment, the relevant ministries seem to be focused on wind power almost exclusively. So they're not looking at the full spectrum of renewable energy sources. And they're also not looking at, for example, the built environment, where the disruption is much less than establishing those in natural areas. This has caused, as I said, some heated debates and even conflicts in many areas. And I think the critical determinant in this case is the proper spatial planning. This has not happened yet. We have an outdated plan. The NGOs have been asking that it be modernized and updated for many years, and this process has just started. So we're hoping that this will determine the areas that can be used and the areas that can be excluded. Now, as regarding other technologies, I showed you an example of an application that allows citizens to report environmental crimes as they see them. So this started from the LIFE project, but the idea is that, and it applies only to Crete for the moment, but the idea is that it will expand it, it will be applicable to the whole of Greece. There are other things like citizen science that we can use to gather information that is lacking. So there are quite a few things that we can do, and there are things that citizens can help with.
That's excellent. Just on the point of technology, there's a question here that says, to what extent are windmills detrimental to bird life in Greece?
Sorry, I'm sorry, there was a gap?
To what extent are windmills detrimental to bird life in Greece?
Actually, they are in areas that are important to the birds. And this is actually about what I was already mentioning. The spatial planning will determine those things. We have several incidents. Actually, there was a recent one where Dalmatian pelicans were killed by wind turbines near Prespa. And we have cases of vultures being hit in Crete. We have deaths of rare birds by wind turbines. So proper planning, I think, is essential to prevent that.
And could you comment about diversity of the plant life and flowers on the island of Lefkada, or any local organization that oversees this?
I'm not sure that there is an organization specific to Lefkada. I would doubt that there would be one, but I think information can be found in several sources. I don't have something specific that I know of for the island, but there are quite a few books on the plants of Greece or flowers of Greece that would cover Lefkada or the Ionian Islands as well.
I think birds seem to be important to our listeners today, because we have another question about birds. Could you say a few words about the bird sanctuary for birds in the Gulf of Galonis in Lesbos?
Yes, actually, it's not the only one. There are a few sanctuaries for injured animals, not just birds. There's one in Kalonia, there's another one in Aegina, there's Anima here in Attica. There are quite a few of them, and they're doing quite a lot of work. They receive animals that have been found injured from hunters or from other causes, and quite a few of them are nursed back to health and released to the wild.
Okay, I think that's probably all the questions that we have. We had some lovely comments, actually. We had a comment, amazing photos and presentation. I had no idea how biodiverse Greece is. Thank you for sharing this with us. And also, yes, I think maybe one more question, but I think you also maybe covered this, but I wasn't aware of this. I think it's quite important. Is Greek mountain tea endangered? I've read that foreigners are illegally harvesting it.
I mentioned that it does happen, especially in the northern border. It's not endangered as such because it's well, actually there's not just one mountain tea. There are several species of Sideritis which are all called mountain teas, but locally it can become endangered, such as in on Mount Gramos, for example, where it's collected a lot by Albanians crossing over. In some places in Bulgaria as well. We are actually working in that area, trying to find ways and promote cultivation of mountain tea, so harvesting from the wild can stop. There's another mountain tea in Crete called Malotira, which is the local species, and that is also threatened by extensive collection. I see there's a comment about the journal. I expect that's the HSPN journal Ifisi, Nature. It's available online on the website, on the HSPN website, which is eepf.gr, from the Greek first letters of Ελληνική Εταιρεία Προστασίας της Φύσης. So the journal is available there. It's not published in English. We're considering, the website has an English section, and we're considering introducing English summaries for some of the articles in the journal, so that may happen soon.
Excellent. And there's another question. What is the status of the European black bear in Greece?
Well, actually, it's a brown bear. The black bear is an American and Canadian species. But fortunately, through protection and because of the work of NGOs such as Arcturus, which some of you may know, or Callisto, it is actually improving, it's expanding its range, and we have now sightings of bears in Mount Iti, where we were running the LIFE project. This is the southernmost limit of its distribution in Greece, and we have presence of bear now in quite a few areas where formerly it was absent for many, many years, such as near Mount Olympus. There were some sightings in, well, the area of Karpenis is one of its areas of main presence, but it's expanding further south into Phokida. So the brown bear is doing reasonably well.
And are the Greek waters overfished? Is there a danger of species disappearing because of this? I think this is a question.
Yes, I think there is a problem with overfishing. Also, there are other practices such as using dynamite for fishing, which creates a lot of damage, not just killing the fish, but destroying everything that's around. And some of the fish stocks have been overfished. So I think this is actually, there are NGOs that are working on that as well. HSPN is not involved in that, but there are quite a few efforts to make sure that only fish of legal size are used in restaurants and all that, and also focusing on the customer so that they will not accept illegal fish or fish that are not of proper size. So those are things that are being targeted by the NGOs.
Right, and just on the issue of fishing, there's another question. Has there been any work with O-Search around tagging sharks or other sea life in Greece that you are aware of?
Well, I know that there's an NGO called Pelagos. There is IC that work with marine life, marine mammals, mostly whales and cetaceans, but also sharks. We do not specifically do that, but information is available.
Do we still have time for more questions? Because there still are quite a few coming through. Can you also speak to the monk seal and conservation? Yes.
That's another important species. Greece hosts, I think, the greater percentage of its Mediterranean population. So Greece is one of the countries that's very important for its protection. There's an NGO called MOM, which specifically focuses on the monk seal. They do quite a lot of work, mainly in the National Park of the Sporades. This is a marine protected area. So it is also one of the species that has benefited from conservation, and its status is stable, at least if not improving.
Okay, well, Nikos, you will join us once again in March for another webinar. We hope everybody can join us again. We've had a lot of questions and comments asking how do we find out more information about educational programs with HSPN. So in the meantime, we invite you to visit HSPN's website, where you can learn about the many wonderful environmental projects and initiatives. And just one moment, I've had.
And would be glad for anyone to contact us directly, and we can assist or provide information. So would be glad to help anyone that wants more information.
Yes, yes, yes.
And that would be info@eepf.gr.
Yes, and your photographic works can also be found in many of your books, in particular your recent book on biodiversity titled Greece, the Land of Diversity. And us, the new leaders, will continue to work closely with HSPN. So please keep an eye out for our mentorship program, which will be launching later in the year. And we thank you all for being a part of the New Leaders webinar event today, and we look forward to seeing you again in March. And if you're interested in becoming involved with the New Leaders, please visit the THI Canada website and sign up. Thank you, and we look forward to seeing you soon.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you.